My name is Matthew Mitchell. I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, and I want to talk for a few minutes about economic freedom. The Fraser Institute has just released the 2012 edition of its annual Economic Freedom of the World Index. Authored by Professors James Gwartney, Robert Lawson, and Joshua Hall, the index assesses economic freedom in 144 countries around the world by looking at 5 factors. They look at the size of government, the extent of regulation, sound money, free trade, and legal systems and property rights. Economic freedom is important because it's closely related to human standards of living. In those countries where people enjoy greater levels of measured economic freedom, citizens also tend to enjoy greater levels of per capita income. This relationship between economic freedom and economic prosperity has been the subject of extensive academic study in recent years, and the vast majority of these studies have reached the same conclusion. A recent survey of 52 separate peer-reviewed academic studies found that regardless of the sample of countries, the measure of economic freedom, and the level of aggregation, there is a solid finding of a direct, positive association between economic freedom and growth. So if economic freedom is so important for our standard of living, how has it trended in recent years? Well, for the better part of 3 decades, economic freedom in the United States has been on the rise. While this steady increase seems to have had little to do with one political party or the other, we can identify a number of policies that likely increased economic freedom. In the late 1970s, under President Carter, several industries were deregulated or partially deregulated. In the early 1980s, rampant double-digit inflation was finally brought under control, and in the mid-1980s there was tax reform. Under Bill Clinton in the 1990s, spending was restrained, and for the first time in decades, federal spending as a share of GDP actually fell. In both the 1980s and 90s, barriers to trade also fell, and throughout this period the U.S. maintained its long-standing commitment to the rule of law. Unfortunately, however, from 2000 onward this trend reversed, and under President Bush, U.S. economic freedom fell precipitously, a decline which only accelerated under President Obama. Focusing on the last 10 years, we can decompose the index of economic freedom into its 5 constituent components to see what's driving this reversal. When we do, we see that 4 of the 5 components of economic freedom have been moving in the wrong direction. On trade, there were steel tariffs that were imposed and then removed in 2003. There were also subsidies to energy firms and increased capital controls. In the area of regulation, there was an ever-expanding bureaucracy with attendant costs and a series of historically large bills, each of which contained an array of new and complex regulations. In the legal systems and property rights component, property rights were undermined in the wake of the Kelo decision on eminent domain, and the ancient criminal standard of mens rea, which requires people to know that they are doing something wrong in order to be found guilty, has been steadily eroded. As the size of government has increased, the size of government component of the index has fallen. On this, we can point to 2 wars, a new prescription drug benefit, and multiple stimulus bills. All told, spending as a share of GDP grew more under President Bush than under any 8-year period since World War II. The only category that has not seen significant declines is the sound money category. In the last several years, however, the Federal Reserve has adopted a number of novel monetary policies known as quantitative easing 1, 2, and 3. Given the current state of economy, these haven't produced significant inflation, which is why this score has remained steady. Only time will tell, however, whether the Federal Reserve will have the ability to withdraw this liquidity at the proper time. One thing is certain. If history and years of academic research is any guide, the significant erosion of U.S. economic freedom will take its toll on long-run U.S. living standards. To learn more about economic freedom, visit the Fraser Institute's website at www.freetheworld.com. You can also visit the Economic Freedom website at economicfreedom.org or our blog at neighborhoodeffects.org and click on the tag Economic Freedom.